I'd like to present this webinar as a celebration of some of the wildlife that we have around our Essex coast. And don't worry, there will be some cute seal pictures coming up very soon. So thank you all for your patience. So Essex has one of the longest coastlines of any English county, possibly the longest coastline of any English county, if QI is to be believed. And Essex does host an absolute abundance of marine life. We don't often see it because with all the estuaries that discharge into our seas around the Essex coast, the water can be cloudy and can make what lies beneath the surface something of a mystery. And we tend, I think some of us tend to assume that it's all more estuarine mud, but there is a lot more to it than that. Not that there's anything wrong with estuarine mud, of course. I'm rather a fan. So this is a photo that just illustrates, I think, the patchwork of landscapes that exist around our Essex coast, pictured on a very high tide. This is Leon Sea. You can see in the background part of Lee Green, the tip of our fantastic nature reserve at Two Tree Island, a wonderful place to watch wintering waders and breeding waders as well on the scrape there. And beyond that, the industry of Canvey Island. And I think it just illustrates along the Thames estuary this wonderful patchwork of residential building, of industrial landscape, of recreational sailing, a fantastic and very very popular leisure activity on the Essex coast, one that me and my father are both particular enjoyers of. So I thought I'd start just by sharing this photo of Essex's coastline from Leon Sea. And as a very populous county, Essex faces multiple pressures, both from recreational access leading to disturbance, particularly of our beach nesting birds, of anchors and such like from boats that can potentially damage some of our rare and threatened seagrass meadows. But it's also a place for me of deep joy and almost, and I have a deep family connection to it, having spent much of my childhood visiting places like Burnham on Crouch and Leon Sea and Malden on the River Blackwater when I was growing up. So Essex has some incredible, fascinating semi-natural coastal habitats. Seagrass meadows like this are a fantastic nursery for young fish, and they're a refuge for seahorses and pipefish, composed mainly in Essex of dwarf eelgrass, one of the species of Zostera eelgrass that grows around our coast. And they're a vital carbon sink as well as a fantastic habitat for wildlife like this. Wildlife like this lovely short-snouted seahorse. This photo from our photo library showing a seahorse in a seagrass meadow. And on the right, a bass, often thought of as a commercially important fish because of its importance to commercial fishermen. But in my view, that is a beautiful animal in and of itself, I think. I hope you can agree in this, presumably a tank photo by Amy Lewis. And fish like this bass love the seagrass meadows because they provide that refuge for growing fish from predators of deeper waters. And they also live in the creeks in our salt marshes, swimming up on the high tide to take advantage of some of the bounteous life there on which they feed. We also host native oyster beds, and our native oyster, once commercially exploited, of course, in Essex on the Blackwater and the Thames estuary, sold in London as a popular staple food, and now 95% decline since the late 19th century. A very, very rare species indeed, but something of a keystone species. Oyster beds transform a muddy seabed. They provide an attachment point for algae and seaweed, and they they provide hiding places for numerous crustaceans and small fish like that bass we saw in the previous slide. Moving closer to our coast, I mentioned estuarine mud, and that's a key habitat for wintering wading birds, and it's a rich habitat for invertebrates. You can often see the bait diggers out at very low tides offshore, digging for the same worms that birds like these dunlin and longer-billed species like curlew will be feeding on in the winter. And the wading birds out on the mud flats are relatively safe from predators, although sometimes when a great black gull or a peregrine sweeps over, you can see them all taking to the sky in wheeling displays. And these birds also need places to roost. I took this photo at Leigh-on-Sea, I think possibly on the same day as I took the previous photo of these two beautiful little egrets. Once a very rare bird, of course, in Essex, now remarkably common, and they're roosting up on this cockleboat in Leigh-on-Sea. The cockleboat's name is Renown, possibly named after that cockleboat that you may have heard of or will hear of, certainly in the next webinar that was lost during the Dunkirk evacuations. But it wasn't this one, and this one is a lovely roosting point for these two little egrets. And birds can take advantage of our scrape at Two Tree Island, which is often alive with birds at high tide. Wheeling flocks of knot and dunlin coming off the estuary to land on the island and scrapes there to roost. And that's why it's so important that we carefully manage disturbance. A dog, for instance, getting down onto that marsh while it's out for a sunny afternoon walk at high tide can, of course, put these birds up, and they don't get many hours between the dark of winter evenings and the tides. So they really do need every moment they can get to roost. Beg your pardon, skip forward too many. This is an aerial view taken from a commercial flight on my way back from my holidays earlier this year. And this is the estuary of the River Blackwater, photographed, as it says, from a commercial flight from a BA A320. Other reconnaissance platforms are available. And these backwaters are a haven both for leisure sailors and for wildlife. And I know that my father and I have had some fantastic encounters with wildlife whilst we've been sailing on the Blackwater, and found ourselves surrounded by common terns, and even seeing the coastal birds as they cross the river, birds like marsh harriers. And seals and fishes make their homes in these quiet backwaters as well. So the heavily protected Blackwater Estuary, a SSSI, SPA, it's got as many acronyms, Ramsar site, it's got as many designations as you can think of, and it is a vital wintering ground for wildfowl and waders, and a truly beautiful river, and a piece of wild coast in so many respects. So whilst the Essex coast isn't perhaps as rocky and precipitous as other coasts around the UK, it is surprisingly wild. At this time of year, the salt marsh moving in off that estuarine mud, the salt marsh is in bloom with these beautiful sea asters and purple sea lavenders as well. So it is a lovely time of year to go and walk by the salt marshes. Relatively quiet for waders, of course, although they are stopping off around our coast at the moment as they begin to make their journeys both from the north to the south and to winter around the Essex coast, whilst our breeding beach nesting birds and coastal birds are making their way further south as well. And our coastal marshes, the other side of the sea wall, they're a man-made habitat cut off from the sea by our sea walls, often for hundreds of years. But many of these fertile pieces of land are very rich habitats. I took this photo whilst I was working in a different role at Fobbing Marshes near Benfleet, and these rather wonderful cows from Essex Wildlife Trust's flock, these beautiful, friendly red poll cows, came to say hello. And these are conservation grazers working to keep this habitat, the coastal grazing marsh, special. And coastal grazing marsh is a really special habitat, near unique, I believe, to Essex and Kent, and includes such sites as fobbing, as I say, rich in insects. It's got a fantastic array of dragonflies there, a great example of the assemblage of dragonflies that crop up there, including ruddy darters that can tolerate the very, very subtle saline influence in some of the borodikes around Essex. Blue House Farm is a triple SI for its wintering Brentford's spectacular flocks. You can see there of a winter's evening. We also have beach nesting birds. I took this photo on a beach where I used to work up in Cumbria when I was with Cumbria Wildlife Trust. This, I believe, is a little tern nest. Some have said it may be a ringed plover nest, and I've made a mistake. But I think that's a little tern nest on the beach at South Walney. And ringed plovers and oyster catchers do nest on our beaches in Essex, at Colne Point, where my colleague Adam Nixon is making a sterling effort to protect them, installing cages around the nests on the beach to stop predators getting at the eggs while they're still in the nest. To great results, actually. He's had very strong results, and a number of ringed plovers have successfully fledged the nest this year. And we also have little terns on Horsey Island near Walton on the backwaters, and we've every hope to see little terns. A very widely distributed but nowhere common bird that nests on the beach in several parts of the world, but never in any great numbers. And we do hope to have those return to Horsey Island. Well, they do live on Horsey Island. We hope to have them return to places like Tolsbury Wick, where they used to nest. And disturbance is a serious issue for beach nesting birds. You can see how well camouflaged those eggs are. They're very easily accidentally trodden on, or very easily munched by a passing dog. One of our nests at Walney was even trampled on by a cow, whilst another was inundated by the tide. So the tide is a threat to little terns, and unfortunately we can't do much about that. But on a very high tide, the little tern nests can be inundated, unfortunately. But the upcoming Buds project, which we'll speak about more later, aims to use dredged sediment to create even more habitat for these wonderful charismatic species. And there's wildlife in our seaside towns as well. This Mediterranean gull, again, a relatively recent colonist of the coast, one of my favourite gulls. The adults' wingtips are pure white. You can tell that this bird isn't quite fully mature because it still has some black feathers in its wingtips. And our built structures provide places for the birds to perch and roost. Turnstones in particular gather sometimes in great numbers on Southend Pier. Occasionally there are even birds of rocky coast, like purple sandpipers during the winter on Southend Pier, and also on the hard sea defences at Southend, as these provide something of an alternative to the rocky coasts that might more usually be inhabited by species like purple sandpipers. And the underwater metal pilings of piers provide anchorage for seaweed and barnacles, and diverse habitats develop, which is why you can quite often see common seals hunting for fish around Southend Pier. And this is another of those birds that takes advantage of the hard sea defences and the piers. And this was on Southend Pier, actually, also. This is a turnstone, and it's making use of some abandoned fishing bait that's been left behind by an angler, perhaps deliberately, for these confiding and frankly gorgeous little birds. Fantastic global travellers that they are. So this might be the bit that you've all been waiting for. I'm not sure. But this is a pair of common seals photographed on Walton backwaters. It's a photo that I cribbed from the from our online photo library at Essex Wildlife Trust. Sadly, it's not mine. I wish I was this good at photographing seals. But here they are, and you can see their coats are stained slightly red, which is something of a feature of those seals that live up around the Walton area, because their coats become stained with the iron oxide that also gives the famous red crag fossiliferous cliffs at Walton their colour. And these are common seals. They're not the most numerous seal in Britain, but they are the most often encountered seal in Essex. And they can be found around Walton backwaters, where there's a breeding colony, and also on the Crouch estuary, where salt marsh provides a place for them to haul out, including salt marsh that's been created on that estuary as part of the ongoing Wild Coast project. So around Wallasey Island and Marsh Farm, great places to see these beautiful creatures out fishing, and they can be surprisingly confiding, and they're very enjoyable to watch. You can see some of the seals in this picture by Josh Kabali that also came from our online library. You can see them in banana pose, which apparently means that they're a contented and happy seal. And there's a lone seal that you can quite often see on the Thames from the front at Purfleet, right in the southeast of the southwest, I should say, of Essex, where you can see the common seal bananaing on the Kent shoreline, and he's a charming fellow. So common seals have a very wide global distribution. They're fish eaters, like the majority of seals. Some, of course, specialise in crustaceans. They breed in spring and summer, and the pups are born almost seaworthy. It's not an experience from Essex, but when I was up on the Scottish coast a few years ago in May, I saw a common seal pup merrily swimming in the water before the white-tailed sea eagles had even finished consuming its placenta, which was a sight to see. So they're not helpless little pups. They can swim almost immediately from when they breed. And they have quite a charming, I think some would say, cute appearance. They're said to have a dog-like face, which I think is probably quite true. And their nostrils also form a V shape. That's a little cheat code for your seal identification. And here is a common seal pup. Again, this isn't my photo. This is a photo taken at Donna Nook in Lincolnshire, a famous breeding site for common and grey seals. And this is, although it doesn't look too happy with the wind-blown sand piling up against it, this does show very much that common seal pups are born able to swim and to thrive. They're not by any means helpless. And this is in contrast to the grey seal, another wonderful looking beast. Its scientific name, Helicoris griffus, means hook-nosed sea pig, which might depend how you feel about that. Might depend about how you feel about hook noses and pigs. They're confined to the North Atlantic. There are a few that live on the coast of Canada and the United States. There are another few that live off the Scandinavian coast. Our nearest breeding sites in Essex are up in Norfolk, at Blakeney Point. You can get a tourist boat there to go out and see the seals. Make sure wherever you go, you always sail with a reputable company that treats the animals with the respect they deserve, because of course they can do without the disturbance of boats passing too close, which does occasionally happen. But adult grey seals do frequently pass by the Essex coast. You can often see them swimming with their faces above water like these, or even bottling, so floating like a bottle in the water with their nose upright out of the water. Can sometimes be mistaken for the fin of a cetacean, but it is the head of a relaxed seal spy hopping. They're more bull-like, slightly more powerful looking animals than the common seals, and the males are big. They are hefty beasts. They have vertical nostrils. Apparently, I'm not sure I can really see the difference, to be honest. And they breed in winter, producing helpless white-coated pups. And this is a picture of grey seals hauled out at Walney Island in Cumbria, at Cumbria Wildlife Trust Reserve. I was very privileged to be able to take this photo. Me and a colleague had to crawl on our bellies to go and survey these seals. And we also had to make sure we picked a day when we were downwind of them so they wouldn't see or smell us and we wouldn't put them back into the sea. And this haul out has lasted for many years. And since 2015 has also been a breeding colony. And one of my favourite things about Walney was when I was near this big grey seal haul out was the sound of the seals singing. They have fantastic voices that carry across the dunes and the wetlands and the sea. This is the edge of Morecambe Bay that you can see here, looking south towards Blackpool, and the noise of these seals gently singing was a wonderful soundtrack. And this isn't my photo, but I think it's compulsory, as I understand it, in any presentation that involves sea mammals to present a picture of the baby grey seal, the fluffy white coat, not fully waterproof, having to spend most of its days, although it does learn to swim in the company of its mother while it is still wearing this white coat. They are not fully seaworthy. They are vulnerable to coastal storms, and they're particularly vulnerable to disturbance because they don't do terribly well in the water, especially unsupervised. So I don't want to bring in any depressing notes, but it does just demonstrate the importance of avoiding disturbance to these creatures, how we need to make sure we give them space. So, cetaceans. Essex, with its relatively shallow seas, probably isn't, in all honesty, the best place in the country to watch cetaceans. This bottlenose dolphin I actually photographed off the coast of North Africa. But they do occasionally pass by the Essex coast. There have been reports of common dolphins in July this year, according to the Sea-Watch Foundation. So cetaceans are about, and this hooked fin is characteristic of the bottlenose dolphin, as is this very active bow wave riding behaviour. This is perhaps a more typical site of a cetacean off the Essex coast. This is a pair of harbour porpoises, which are a beautiful little dolphin with a very short snout. They lack the distinct strong beak of some of the larger dolphin species, and they don't typically breach. You typically see these triangular fins and this small arched back breaking the water. They're seldom more than 1.5 meters long, quite often smaller, but they're a very handsome, sleek little dolphin. They tend to be quite shy and stick close to the coast, avoiding thugs like the bottlenose dolphins. And they tend to, I've seen them migrating through the English Channel off the shore at Dungeness in Kent, so not too far from us. And they are regularly sighted off Walton on the Naze as they make their way by. And at Dungeness, where I was watching, that's the English Channel. That's one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. So we do coexist with and are closer to cetaceans than a lot of us might imagine. And this is the common dolphin, which is sometimes found around the Essex coast. As I say, they've been recorded off the Kent coast multiple times this year. They breach frequently, and when they do so, they're unmistakable with this lovely yellow side panel. This isn't my photo. I'm terribly sorry to the author of this photo. I seem to have omitted their name, but this is a fantastic looking dolphin. There's a famous dolphin watch point in Scotland called Chanonry Point, which is just outside Inverness, and it's famous for bottlenose dolphins leaping and chucking salmon in the air and doing the kind of slightly mean things bottlenose dolphins like to do. And I've never seen a bottlenose dolphin there, despite having lived quite close by and spent a lot of time there. But one of my best experiences from watching at Chanonry Point was in late August or early September. A huge pod of common dolphins were moving through the Moray Firth, and the sight of a pod of these, including tiny youngsters, the size of puppies, jumping out of the water was really something extremely memorable and absolutely spectacular. So they are wonderful creatures, and encounters with these off the Essex coast are not impossible. Remember, this is the North Sea. It is the same sea as the sea that the Moray Firth washes into. Um, and another species, the biggest dolphin regularly seen in UK waters. On the west coast, you do occasionally get Risso's dolphins and around the far north of Scotland. But this is a bottlenose dolphin, one of our larger dolphins, up to 3 meters long or more. And this is found on the east coast of the British Isles, sometimes in great numbers. I remember being at up in Yorkshire at Flamborough Head, the famous seabird colony up there, and a big pod of bottlenose dolphins were moving by offshore, and it was breaching dolphins and greybacks from horizon to horizon, and they were absolutely magnificent. And that probably was the same pod at the Moray Firth. I took this photo from a boat in the North Sea off Northumberland. So they might come this far south. They come to Lincolnshire and Yorkshire, again on the east coast, the North Sea coast. So sightings of bottlenose dolphins are not impossible. So yeah, look for an active dolphin, large with a distinctly hooked dorsal fin, sometimes in large groups, quite often with scratches, not as pronounced scratches as on the Risso's dolphin, but scratches from fights between the male dolphins. You could see them on that photo that I took off the Moroccan coast, and that they often have these bite marks on their backs left by other dolphins. And this is a minke whale. And again, this is one I took on holiday in Scotland. But they are not uncommon off the west coast of Scotland, and they are sighted annually or so in the southeast of England. So if you're really lucky, you might catch sight of a small but still pronounced black dorsal fin on a very big grey back. Truly a great whale, a baleen whale, a filter feeder feeding on shoals of fish. So it'll come and scoop up the fish with its mouth wide open and then drive the water out through its baleen plates and catch the little fish on the inside. So a dream to see one of these, but perhaps one for your Highland holidays. And very rarely other cetaceans do appear off the Essex coast. Humpback whales, of course, have been recorded in the Thames, sadly with mixed fates, but they have been seen off the Essex and Kent coasts. And here on the left, of course, it's is Benny the beluga, as many people saw him. Tom is an excellent photographer, by the way, who very kindly allowed me to share and use this photo of his. And this white beast in the middle of this photo is the back of Benny the beluga whale, who spent much of 2018 in the Thames. He is believed to have successfully left the Thames safely and hopefully returned to his home in the high Arctic. And this photo, taken I believe from Grays or thereabouts, does illustrate the danger to marine mammals in the Thames estuary and in the Channel with these big ships constantly on the move. But Benny did all right. So very rarely, occasional other cetaceans do appear off the Essex coast. So moving on from The mammals. What other marine megafauna might we encounter around the Essex coast? This is a lesser spotted dogfish, sometimes called a spotted cat shark, very much a small shark that lives in the seas um, of Essex and all the way around the UK coast. It's quite a common species. And this is a taupe shark. This individual photographed in an aquarium in the United States, I believe. Very widely distributed, but critically endangered, with a very small, thinly distributed worldwide population. But they have been recorded off the Essex coast, um, alive in Frinton in 2024, and also they've been found washed up dead on the coast at Clacton. So sightings of this harmless but fearsome and very sharky looking shark, in my view, are very important to conservation efforts. So if you are lucky enough to see the fin of a shark, be it a fast moving taupe shark or a slow filter feeding enormous basking shark, do report that to the relevant people so we can use that to inform the conservation efforts that go on around our coast and in our seas. And this is again a lesser spotted dogfish. This photo probably was taken in the wild by the noted wildlife photographer Jack Perks, famous underwater wildlife photographer. And small sharks like this are relatively common, and we can look for their egg cases when we go to the beach. Their egg cases are fantastic little finds on the beach. If you come across an egg case, a little flat, leathery mermaid's purse with twisty tendrils coming out of each of the four corners that would have anchored onto seaweed, that is the egg case of a fish like this wonderful lesser spotted dogfish. And occasionally you find dead sharks of this size too when they've been abandoned as bycatch by commercial fishing, very sadly. But they are out there, and their egg cases are a fantastic bit of strandline treasure to keep your eyes out for. Another type of egg case you might find on the Essex coast is the egg case of a ray, like this thornback ray. That's a slightly broader, perhaps more classic mermaid's purse, without the tendrils at the end, but with the 4 points in each of the corners. Perhaps I should have thought to include a photo of one of those. But rays like this thornback are out there off the Essex coast, and I'm sure I've seen one swimming in a marina near Burnham on Crouch. Although I haven't persuaded anyone to believe me, I don't think. Um, so they are out there and they are about, but the sediment-rich water makes them hard to see. It's not a great place to snorkel. The currents and the suspended sediment make that quite difficult. But these fantastic megafauna are there. And I can't talk about sharks in Essex without doing a little bit of paleontology, I'm afraid. So I can't use for when these sharks' teeth are from my standard measurement of geological time, which is back when sharks were dropping their teeth off Walton on the Naze. These date from about 50 million years. So they were contemporaries of the giant birds that ate tiny horses. If that jogs any memories, I don't know. And they're fossilized in the London clay, which underlies the famous red crag from which these other fossils came from. And if you're really lucky, you might even find a megalodon tooth. They're secondary fossils. They've been weathered out of earlier rocks and turn up in the red crag, and quite often look weathered compared to the relatively fresh looking, albeit wildly discoloured, black shark's teeth out of the London clay. So these sand tiger sharks would have swum in a tropical sea 50 million years or so ago. And whilst we can't save those sharks of 50 million years ago, Essex Wildlife Trust is very active in protecting and safeguarding our coastal and marine wildlife for the future. These Brent geese, this photo I took at Southend of these three Brent geese grazing on the algae on the hard seawall at a high tide there. And this is a really a bird of the Essex coast. 45% of the world population of this dark-bellied subspecies of Brent goose winters around the Essex coast. Our lovely site at Blue House Farm is a triple SI, especially for wintering populations of these rather charming little geese, much smaller than the Canada and greylag geese you get on the local park. And I think they're rather wonderful. Um, we're currently embarking upon a new and exciting project. You may be hearing this here first, and the beneficial use of dredged sediment or buds, which is a partnership between the Environment Agency, the RSPB, ourselves at Essex Wildlife Trust, and Harwich Haven, the port authority that looks after the port of Harwich. And they aim to create a few new islands for flood management, first and foremost in the Blackwater estuary. But these dredged shingle islands, some of which already stand off Tollsbury Wick and Old Hall Point, will hopefully become excellent, relatively secure nesting sites for birds like this gorgeous ringed plover in this photo by Tom Marshall. And they will hopefully provide shingle habitat above the reach of the highest tides, and will provide refuge for birds like this little tern. So hopefully work on those will start in autumn 2026. And we are looking to create even more beach nesting habitat, which is vital with so many of our beaches subject to disturbance and also to tidal inundation. And I mentioned earlier in the talk about my colleague Adam Nixon, whose cages around ringed plover nests have increased hatching success by preventing predation, and by carefully controlling access and landing at Colne Point, waders are kept safer from disturbance, which, as we know, can be absolutely lethal to wading birds. And you can help by keeping dogs away from secluded beaches and always maintaining a safe distance from wading birds, especially nesting ones. If you see, for instance, a ringed plover dragging a wing in a distraction display, it's feigning a broken wing to lead predators away from its nest, and that's one of its last resort defenses. Similarly, if oyster catchers start mobbing you, and they will fly low and noisily over your heads. They're not putting on an air display for you. They're asking you to clear out of the area. So do show them a bit of space to do this. Essex Wildlife Trust has also been involved in transplanting seagrass from established meadows and reintroducing it to its historic sites in the Thames and Blackwater estuaries. And we're also involved in trying to restore the native oyster to its former glory in the Thames and the Blackwater estuaries, where it belongs. Managed realignment breaches in the seawall at Fingringhoe and Abbots Hall Farm have shown what a natural progression from land to sea can look like in Essex, from scrubland and woodland down into natural salt marsh. This photo was taken by Terry Whitaker at Abbots Hall Farm during that project, and it's great to see the salt marsh blooming at this time of year. Something you can get involved in, or your community groups can get involved in, is beach cleaning. Plastic pollution is a serious threat to marine mammals. The impact of plastic rubbish, whether that's fallen off barges on the Thames or been thrown away by beachgoers, or as flotsam and jetsam off boats passing by even quite a long way offshore, is a real threat to our sea mammals, as I'm sure a lot of us know. And by going out and cleaning our beaches, we can make a small but real difference to our marine mammals, like this wonderful crowd in Clacton in this photo that was kindly sent to me by Adrian Smith, who's a leading light in the litter picking scene around Clacton and Walton. So it's a great opportunity to get out, get involved, and make our seas a little bit safer for wildlife. And also, if you are lucky enough to see something like these incredible orcas, this photo is again from off the coast of Morocco, I'm afraid. But do add your sightings to nature counts on the Essex Wildlife Trust website, because we're always interested to hear about Essex's marine life. And your sightings of cetaceans can really help us direct efforts towards their conservation. So again, I couldn't resist another photo, this time of an adult Mediterranean gull, showing those lovely white wingtips. In summer, it's got an absolutely jet black head. It really does look very different to a black-headed gull. The wing pattern is completely different. Seen here, perched on top of a beach hut again at Southend with an old-fashioned gaslight in the background. And Southend is a surprisingly good and vibrant place to watch wildlife. It's one of the best places in winter to see birds like this Mediterranean gull, and common seals like these will take advantage of the fish around the pilings at the base of the pier. The metal is almost an artificial reef that's being created out there. So do consider, well, if you happen to be walking on Southend Pier, taking the opportunity to look for wildlife. Also, being that much further out in the river, you quite often get better views of some of the birds out on the water as well. Most famously, of course, the white-billed diver a few years ago that got a lot of local twitchers very excited. The Blackwater Estuary is one of my favourite places in the world, and it's characterised by birds like these black-tailed godwits, by the mast of a Thames barge, one of those iconic historic vessels that still ply these rivers. And among all the leisure sailors and anglers, there is an abundance of wildlife on the Blackwater estuary. The grazing marshes at Tollesbury Wick are a great place to see both breeding, farmland breeding, and wintering waders. And hundreds of waders will gather at Bradwell Shell Bank, near St Peter's in the Wall on the Blackwater estuary near Bradwell. So really, some of my absolute favourite spots are on the Blackwater estuary. The Crouch estuary, again, it's a great place to see common seals, particularly around the confluence of the Crouch and the Roach, Foulness and Wallasey Islands. Great places to go out and see seals at any time of year. And breeding waders and Brent geese, of course, gather in great numbers at Blue House Farm. And I'm sure that common seals are a strong possibility from there. I've seen them up in the creeks in the salt marsh at Marsh Farm near Southwood and Fair as a council-run country park site, and it was wonderful to see those up close. So fantastic encounters, including with wild sea mammals, are possible close to home. And you can often see wintering great crested grebes and even wintering red-throated and great northern divers, big swimming bird underwater predators of fish that you might encounter there. And also places like Wallasey and Blue House Farm as well are very well used by wintering raptors, like marsh and hen harriers. So there's always a lot to see. And then if you go up to the far northeast corner of our county, Walton on the Naze and the open sea. So Walton on the Naze is a peninsula projecting into the North Sea. Fulmars occasionally nest in the soft red crag cliffs. We don't have the big seabird cities that the rocky coasts in other parts of the country do, but we do have nesting seabirds, including on these wonderful geologically fascinating cliffs at Walton on the Naze. And Hamford Water and Walton backwaters are sheltered and home to common seals. And this open coast often offers the best chance of catching sight of something like a porpoise, or even that big dark fin or dark grey back and the magic of a cetacean sighting. So thank you very much.